There's a reason that man avoids God.
There's a reason that man would rather subscribe to theories that have no basis in fact, no basis in science, no basis in any place other than a man's demented mind, and created an attempt to avoid God, to explain God away, to try to put him in a corner and avoid him completely. You see, man in his natural state wants nothing to do with God. Man in his carnal state or natural state, carnal is the word that the Bible uses, man in his carnal state does not want anything to do with God. He doesn't want to obey God. He doesn't want to hear about God. He doesn't want to obey God's laws. He wants absolutely nothing to do with God. In Romans chapter 8, verses 6 and 7, Paul says, "For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Because the carnal mind is enmity or hostile or at odds against God. For it is not subject to the law of God, nor indeed can be. So then those who are in the flesh cannot please God." You see, that's the reason, if you're one of those that, in spite of the evidence, still hangs on to ridiculous theories like the theory of evolution, that's the reason you do it. You do it as a result to where you don't have to face God. And I guarantee you that people who go so out of their way to reject God and embrace evolution in spite of the lack of evidence for it, the reason you're doing it is because you're living in sin. And you enjoy your sin. And you don't want to give up your sin. And so if you can explain God away, if you can, in your mind, make yourself think that God doesn't exist, you don't have to change anything about your life. Because you like living how you're living. You like doing what you want to do without any accountability. And that's mankind at its core. Mankind is sinful at its core. Since the Garden of Eden, man has been sinful. Man's basic nature is not good. Man's basic nature, his basic nature is sinful. It's corrupt. The Bible says there is none righteous, no, not one. And so you just want to go on your merry way and do your thing. But let me enlighten you. There is a God. I've seen lives changed, whose God has changed. I've seen multiple answers to specific prayers that God has answered. God has revealed himself to us in his word. He's not going to send fire down from heaven or perform some miracle in front of you to try to make you believe in him. He has given his word, and that is sufficient. He has revealed himself in his word and through his word, and that is sufficient. He has revealed himself, as the book of Romans says, by the things that are made. And let me just say this, and I keep going back to this one question because I believe it's so important. I don't care what theories you have. I don't care what you try to argue as far as evolution. The one question that evolution cannot answer is how something came out of nothing. Well, this, and these things reacted together and this and that. Where did they come from? Where did they come from? Yeah, oh, this reacted with this, and this reacted with this, and this came with this. Baloney. If you can't answer the prime question, anything else that you say is of no relevance. And you'll hear me say that and hear me say it again and again and again. Because there is only one way you can explain things coming into being, and that is through a supernatural power. I mean, how much of an idiot, really, I'm not trying to be derogatory when I say that, but how much of an idiot do you have to be to think that way in eternity past there was absolutely nothing? Things just don't spring from nothing. Spontaneous generation was disproven years and years ago. It doesn't happen. Matter cannot be created or destroyed. It's the first law of thermodynamics. And when it is created, if it were, let's just say this, if it were to be created on its own, it would immediately break down because of the second law of thermodynamics, which is the law of entropy. So, it's dead before it starts. There's no way, first of all, that something could come out of nothing. I mean, think about it. You go back as far as your mind can take you, and we can only go back so far because we're very finite beings. You go back as far as your mind can take you. And you go back into the the beginning of time. Also, where did time come from? Time had to be created. Because before that, it would have just been, but your mind, let your mind take you back and you try to think, okay, here was this Big Bang or whatever it was that happened. What exploded? There had to be some matter in the first place to explode. Where did the matter come from? It boggles the mind to think, how could everything that exists just all of a sudden spontaneously generate? How could space be created? How could all of the stars and the planets and everything that occupies all that space? How could our universe, through chaos, develop itself into a synchronized system? How could the earth be created with breathable air for us to breathe on accident? You have to totally disregard common sense to think that any of that could happen by accident. Seriously. It so goes against common sense that it boggles the mind. There's absolutely no way that matter or space or anything could self-generate, and especially from nothing. And you go back as far as you can go. You go back to when there was nothing. Well, guess what? If there was ever a time that there was nothing, there would be nothing now. You cannot have something spring from nothing. And let's just say, for argument's sake, that something did explode and it created matter. How did that matter come alive? How did that matter all of a sudden become a conscious being and be self-aware with the ability to think and to love and to feel fear and to feel anger, to feel emotions. Where did emotions come from? People, there's absolutely no way. The human body is more complicated than anything that we've ever created with all of our technology. We've never created anything like the human body. And the body has to be in perfect working harmony or it dies. When you get something just a little off kilter, you get sick. Those of you who had COVID, which I'm one of those, I had it a year ago, January. That was not a fun time, but I've had cases of the flu that were many times worse. When your body gets like this, it's not fun. When you get sick, it's not fun. But yet the body has the ability to heal itself. Where did that come from? The other day I talked about the DNA molecule and the code and the information that is written in that molecule. To say that the DNA molecule came about as a result of chance is just as valid to say that a computer program just appeared on your desk out of nowhere that you loaded onto your computer. The DNA molecule is millions of times more complicated than any computer program you've ever written. And yet, you think that came about as a result of an accident? Not hardly. Not hardly. No, people. If you believe in evolution and say there's no God, you're fooling yourself. You are absolutely fooling yourself. And let me just say this, and you'll hear me say this time and time again. Eternity is a very long time. Eternity is forever. Eternity is never ending. Eternity is a very long time to be wrong. As I said in another video I uploaded earlier, are you really willing to stake your eternal destiny on some theory that came from some reprobate mind with the simple purpose of trying to explain away God? Are you really willing to chance it? Because let me tell you, people, I'm being totally serious here. If you're wrong and you reject God, you will spend eternity in hell. And you may not think it exists, you may not think God exists, you may not think hell exists, but both do exist. And the sad thing is, you will find out the hard way once you die. Look, I don't want anybody to go there. I really don't. But I'm just hoping that I can shake somebody out of their sleep. Shake them enough to make them really think about things and say, hey, do I really want to take this gamble? Because it is a gamble. And think how short a time even if we live to be 100, think how short a time 100 years is compared to eternity. Our time here on this earth is just, it's like one grain of sand in the Sahara Desert. One tiny grain of sand compared to that whole desert. And even that might be an underestimation. It's a long time, people. You really need to think long and hard about the choice that you make. You want to just keep going on your merry way, living your life the way you want to, living in your sin, rejecting God, then go ahead. But one day, you will pay the price. You'll pay the price for all eternity. Please listen to what I'm saying and think about what I'm saying. I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm just trying to wake you up. I'm just trying to make you see reality. There's not one shred of evidence for evolution, and I keep saying that. And I don't care what anybody says. Before you say anything else, you've got to tell me how something came out of nothing. You've got to tell me how things just generated themselves out of completely nothing. How life sprang from, and it's like I said earlier. If you want to be realistic about it, as an evolutionist, here's what you believe. You believe that your recliner at home, or whatever chair you use to watch TV in, can all of a sudden gain consciousness, become a living being, and go hopping out the door. Now, I know that sounds kind of funny, but that's basically, in a nutshell, what you're believing. You're believing that a rock can somehow gain consciousness and evolve into a rat, into a lizard, or whatever, and then become a man. I mean, think how stupid that is. Really, I mean, it's just plain stupid. I mean, if your neighbor came walking up to you and said, "Hey, my broom just sprung legs and eyes and a head, and now it's talking to me," you'd be like calling a loony bin, put this guy in a straitjacket. But yet, as an evolutionist, that's really what you believe. That is. If you want to get it down to the brass tacks, that's what you believe. Because you believe an inanimate object can all of a sudden pop and bingo, now it's a living being. You ever seen that happen? No. Oh, and by the way, have you seen a half something and half something being? Oh, they've got all kinds of arguments why you don't see it nowadays. That's baloney. If you got something that goes into progress, it's going to stay in progress. It's not going to all of a sudden just stop. If evolution were true, we'd see half ape, half man. We'd see half lizard, half bird. We'd see all kinds of intermediate species. And there's no intermediate species in the fossil record either. They've never found one shred. So how can you keep hanging on to something like that when there's absolutely not one shred of evidence to prove any of it? In fact, like I said, it goes against every law of science. The theory of evolution goes against science. It's not science. It goes against it. So seriously, you're gonna trust your eternal destiny to something like that? Seriously? You really need to think long and hard about what I'm saying. You really do. Because if that's what you're putting your trust in, you're just being an idiot. You really are. It's just pure stupidity. But you know, People want to hang on to their sin. People want to hang on to their lifestyle. They don't want any accountability. They don't want anybody to tell them what to do. But you know what? You can go ahead and live like that. And face the consequences. I hope somebody at least listens to what I'm saying and takes it into deep consideration and really thinks about it. Because there's not a more important decision that you'll ever make in your life than what determines your eternal destiny.